Finally, we get to climb on the beautiful Pune Sholapur highway. Woohoo! Hello, YouTube. I hope everyone is doing well and taking good care of yourselves. Welcome to my channel, Dirty Boots. At the very onset, I want to tell you that this is not a monetized channel. But if you like the content, then please consider hitting the like button. And more than that, please subscribe because it's always good to know that there are some people out there who like your work. All right, then. Now to the core. I think that the channel has quite an honest name because your boots actually get dirty when you ride, and more so when it's raining. And the rainy season has already begun in this part of India, as you will also notice when you see the skyline further ahead in this video. I think I need to give you a little bit of an introduction about myself before we get talking. I have been a YouTuber since 2011, and it began with making and uploading videos of airbox modifications on one of my earlier bikes, and then I started making ride videos in 2012 using a cheap Chinese camcorder mounted on the handlebar of my 150cc Yamaha SZX. Nothing but using ordinary hardware like braces and balls. And back in the day, at least in India, there were quite literally no options available for what we take so much for granted today in terms of action filming. The bottom line is that there was no GoPro back then, or at least I had never heard about it. Hence, and also because of budget constraints, I had to settle for that cheap Chinese camcorder, but it served the purpose, so I don't think I had the rights to complain much about it. I have been touring on motorcycles for almost 2 decades now. Prior to that, my use of motorcycles was limited to commuting, obviously because my first motorcycle was just a 110cc Yamaha Crux, which was purely a city runabout machine, and then came a derivative of the Honda CRF 230, which proved to be an excellent touring machine, at least for me. In fact, my first tour ever was on that very Honda, and it involved riding for 950 kilometers in less than 24 hours, and that was a memorable one. For all the right reasons, as I'm sure you can imagine and also relate to. In 2010, the Honda gave way to another Yamaha, which was for more than 10 years. And that was because post 2012, I was touring mostly by cars. And we'll talk about that later, a little more, a few stories about it. So, between 2012 and 2021, I had done no motorcycle tours or even significant rides, for that matter of fact, but after the pandemic struck, and we were all confined to our homes for a good full year, the motorcycle bug came back to bite me again. Not that it had ever left me, but somehow it never felt so much like an urge to return to riding until, let's say, sometime in the middle of 2021. And as they say, a true motorcyclist never defects from the clan. Neither did I. The Yamaha was sold off in 2021, and then began the hunt for a suitable motorcycle. I wanted something a little more powerful this time, and I wanted it to be a little more manageable and a lot more enjoyable. I do have to confess that secretly I had always been quite fascinated by the Royal Enfields. My pick of the lot was the Thunderbird 500X, which viewers from outside India may not be aware of because it was never sold in the UK or the US. And the reason behind that was that that Triumph owns the Thunderbird mark. So there would have been trademark violations if Royal Enfield tried to sell that motorcycle in those markets, not least with the Thunderbird name. Anyways, after the BS6 emission norms, which were the equivalent of Euro 5 when they kicked in 2020, the Thunderbird line of products from Royal Enfield was discontinued, only to be soon replaced by Meteor, and that too was delayed because of the pandemic. So, the Meteor was designed by Royal Enfield for the global markets, but it did not have a 500cc engine and only came with a single engine option, which was a 350cc brand new J series engine with a counterbalancer and a fuel injection system. The point here to be noted is that both these features were absent in the Thunderbird 350 and the Thunderbird 350X, but the Thunderbird 500 series did come with fuel injection. However, those engines did not have a counterbalancer. So when I was making a purchase decision, I had all kinds of motorcycles in mind, including the BMWs, the TVS Apache RR310, the KTMs, and the Husqvarnas, but I finally only test drove the Interceptor 650 and the Meteor 350 because I was quite certain that I wanted the Royal Enfield and nothing else. Now, being away from the motorcycle scene for almost a decade, and that doesn't mean that I wasn't riding or driving or touring, I was still a little overwhelmed by the Interceptor when I was test riding it. But I found the Meteor to be a very comfortable motorcycle and a more manageable one vis-a-vis the Interceptor. So, all things considered, the Meteor won. Little did I know at that time that the resurrection of the motorcyclist within me would soon lead me to outgrow the Meteor and begin craving once again for a more potent machine. And that in is not in any way an indicator or a suggestion that the Meteor is an inferior machine. It's very much capable a motorcycle which will keep you going at about 90 to 100 kilometers per hour all day long. And that is the highest speed limit you can have in Indian highways or expressways. In fact, the Meteor is an excellent example of what pure good old motorcycling is intended to be, and that wonderful little engine, as well as the solid build quality, only go on to aid that experience. You may desire to go faster with more fury, but no matter what, you simply cannot resist falling in love with the Meteor. Allow me to elaborate on that, and I will begin by saying that I'm not the only one who's impressed with the Meteor. If nothing else, its sales figures bear testimony to its acceptance, not just in India, but more or less across the global markets. Nor am I going to tell you something new or different which you may not have come across in the countless good reviews of this motorcycle, but then every perspective has something unique about it, and hence here is another one. To begin with, I would say that I like the way the engine sounds and it feels, the way it feels while riding, even though it comes with a counterbalancer shaft, and it's pretty much vibe free when compared to the previous generations of Royal Enfield engines. It still has what most people like to call a character. It's an alive and kicking engine, and that dug dug sound comes across with nice vibes, which tell you that there's a living, breathing engine doing its thing between your legs. And no matter who says what, the rear view mirror still vibrates enough to fool you into mistaking a compact hatchback approaching from behind you into a full-size SUV. Bottom line, you mostly just get to see a shadowy image of things behind you in those mirrors. Well, this could very likely not be the case with all meteors, and I say that because I did not face this issue initially, but somehow it appeared after a few weeks into the ownership. And then I see it happen more often with the right-hand mirror than with the left-hand mirror. And that leads me to believe that there could well be many, many Meteor owners who may not be facing this issue completely. And if that is the case, then it's a good thing. Well, all things said and done, I think, and I conclude that Royal Enfield probably have not completely eradicated this menace, but then isn't that what we call character? You still have made a very formidable machine in summation. The engine is torquey, it delivers its power in a very linear fashion, and the calibration of the fuel injection system is very well mastered. No jerks, no jolts, and that is quite commendable. It feels very predictable, and that makes the overall experience very enjoyable and satisfactory. It's also a very frugal machine which delivers upwards about 30 kilometers per liter on petrol on the highway, and better than that in the city. Keep in mind, though, that the fuel economy is highly subjected to one's riding style. The chassis is very strongly built, and you can feel the reassurance of it while riding. Overall, it's a very cohesive experience. The brakes, while being ABS at both ends, are not really quite up to the mark, but they are not poor in any sense. I think you will have to learn to use them judiciously to better the overall braking performance, and the limitations are that of the design. Because you see, the Meteor is a semi-cruiser. The brakes have to be slightly rear biased, otherwise the chances of meeting terra firma under hard braking circumstances substantially increase. Plus, it's in terms of the design purely, it's meant to be ridden in a rather relaxed manner, so that they could simply have not gone for a razor sharp front brake setup, which actually increases your braking performance. But with some time in observation, I think one should be able to get this well sorted. Nothing that you can conquer. Uh, Overall, I think the motorcycle has got good size rubber at both the ends, which helps the overall riding experience. You have a 100 by 90 section tire at the front and 140 by 70 section at the rear. Both are tubeless because you have alloys. Not that you cannot have tubeless on spoke wheels, but that's a different arrangement. The tires come from a company called Seat, and those are rather soft compound tires, not extremely soft, but still not very hard. So a pretty balanced composition, I would say. And these tires do a good job of what they're meant to do. You still can, however, never complete a review of the Meteor without talking about the instrument cluster. If you know about this machine, this bike, motorcycle, and if you have followed the evolution of Royal Enfield motorcycles as a company, you would also know about the Spartan instrumentation their bikes have always had. We used to just have an analog speedometer, a low fuel level indicator, an amp meter, which is very unusual by the way, and just a few telltale lights. But all of that has now changed. Royal Enfield offer an analog digital instrument cluster now, which gives you a very detailed list of information like fuel level, even though the fuel gauge I think is a little erratic. Economy, driving mode, trip meters, two of them, the odometer. You have the ABS warning lights on top of everything else. You have a made with Google Tripper navigation system, which, when not in use, functions as a large-sized digital clock with day and night illumination modes. Nothing out of the world, but very practical nonetheless. The lighting is significantly LED with an LED DRL on the headlamp. You have the LED stop lamps, the rest of it halogen, and the headlight in low beam. It's not really quite up to the mark, but the high level beam is still satisfactory. With that said, I would still replace it with something more potent for night riding or go for a pair of auxiliary lights. We'll see how that works out. Okay, so if you're not new to the channel, then you would know that I have modified the airbox intake as well as the catalytic converter housing chamber, which means I've removed the cat card. This is illegal, to allow for a more free flow arrangement, more free flow of air arrangement, intake and exhaust. You can find those videos on my channel, and that has allowed me for a much more relaxed and free-flowing performance experience. Let me say that the gains are not in terms of numbers or statistics, but more in terms of the overall experience. The machine now revs a lot more smoothly. It builds up a revs a lot better, and especially after the catalytic converter job, the exhaust sound has improved a lot. It's, to be precise, sounds a lot more bassy and free-flowing, and that is especially true when you're riding at higher speeds and also higher revs on the highway. Pure rumble. I intend to post a video of that, of the highway riding exhaust sound sometime very soon. Expect it to be very short, but just to give you a taste of it. And to top all of that, Royal Enfield have also made available a whole list of accessories, which, as a matter of fact, in fact, my Meteor came with a low riding seat, which otherwise would have costed me around 4,000 Indian rupees or somewhere around 44 pounds. But I never liked that seat so much, so I had to ultimately buy a touring seat, which I'm so glad I did. It's a far better cushioned one. It's got bolstering in the right place. The R supports your bottom nicely, and good decision overall. It supports you over long rides. So unless you are vertically constrained, with no disrespect to anyone, I'd say you go for the touring seat, and my 2 cents are that you will not regret that decision. Another must, in my opinion, is the backrest, which is an optional extra for the Fireball variant, but it's a must if you ever intend to host a pillion on your Meteor. The engine guard, the side rack support, and all the blah 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 accessories are completely at your discretion. But the engine guard I would still recommend, because under those tricky situations, it's a very handy support you have. Overall, I think it's a very finely balanced marriage between the old school charm and the new generation reliability. I think it's a machine which is a very strong indicator of the direction in which Royal Enfield is headed. And unless I have lost my mind, I think it's good news. Oh, wait, I see a restaurant out there on the side of the highway, and I think I need to get a cup of tea. So I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye bye.